Hello and welcome to BoardGameCast. This is episode 8 and my name is Jesper Edmark, also known as Mordachai on BoardGameGeek. This episode I will give you a 4-player game of History's first release. It is a game by Cyril the Magd. Yes, I cannot pronounce that properly, but I hope you can cope anyway. And it is a game of area control and bluffing. You try to bluff your opponents to give you the areas that give points and gems. Gems are the real focus of the game, because they will give you the majority of your points in the end game scoring. As you can see, Twix, my cat here, is very interested in the game, and she made it a bit problematic to set it up. Now, 4-player game. This will be with the Is Plus expansion, so we could have gone up to 5, but this will be a 4-player one, and there are some differences between the game types depending on how many players there are. The fewer players, the more actions each player have each round. So it is quite a big difference between number of players. The gems, as you see here, is actually also an expansion, but it's not a very big one for that. It was called the Bag of Gems expansion for us. Now, I know there are a new version of this game out there on the market right now. I haven't seen that version, but if you haven't played this game before, I really recommend you give it a try. It's a game where you really can stab your friends in the back, and you can really mess with their heads. I know this game is a bit older, and I know that it is not one of the most known games out on the market, so that is why I will give a short explanation of the rules here. A quick how to play, so to speak. To win, you need to collect gems and points. Gems can be collected from each district as well as the market, which is highlighted here, but you do not know which of the gems will be valued most at the end of the game. That is something that the players change throughout the course of the game by placing in the market, and that means that you have to balance collecting gems with trying to make sure that your game type is the one that will be worth most in the end of the game. To collect gems and as well as placing in the market, you use your brokers. Each player have 11 brokers at their disposal, in a 4-player game at least, and what you do is that you place these out on the board in the spots that are available. Each spot in the market can only hold 1 broker, but each place out in the districts can hold as many as you like. When you place brokers, you place 1 face up and you place 1 face down, and you go around in the turn order to place out all your brokers, but 2 at a time. That means that some of your brokers will be hidden and some of them will be shown to the other players. That is where the bluff element comes in. You also gain static points. For instance, if you place in the middle area of each district, you gain 3 points, and each time you place in the market you gain 1 point. Now, each of the district areas are won by majority, and you have to have the majority at the end of the round to get the benefit of that area. You also count out the entire district, and the one that has the most points in the entire district gains 2 of the gems that are in the port. The second player gains 1 of the other, and the third player gains the last game. Player number 4 gains nothing. At the start of each round, you choose 2 of your 11 brokers that you place face up outside the screen. Well, they are placed face down until everyone has chosen, of course. And this is your tiebreaker value, as well as determining the turn order of that round. The one who has the highest value chooses where in turn order he or she wants to be. So if you have high values, you can go last, which is often very good, or first. That is the second best option in my opinion. And then when everyone has chosen, you go around and you place 2 brokers at a time until everyone has placed the brokers on the board. As you see here, we are in the middle of round 1. I am going first here, so I will have a little less control over what the other players will do. But on the other hand, I will be able to have more bluffing moves, since the other players don't know what I have placed and have to take a higher chance of what I have placed where. I want to stress that tiebreak value is good. As I said, you have 11 brokers at your disposal, and 8 of these will come out onto the board. The first 2, the stake, are something that you cannot place onto the board after you have revealed them. So they are used partly as determining the turn order, and then a tiebreak value if you happen to have the same value in an area as another player, and that will happen. The absolute last broker that you have left will be added to the stake that you made at the beginning of the round, and will thus make up your total tiebreaker value. If you should happen to have the same tiebreak value, you will use the turn order cards as a second tiebreaker. So if I would end up with the same number as any of the other players in this round, I would win the tiebreak. So that is why the first number 1 turn order card is slightly better than number 2 or 3. As you see, we made a small mistake here, but we corrected it before it made any harm here. Henrik had placed 2 brokers face down, and that is not allowed. You must always place exactly 1 broker face up and 1 broker face down. Now, if you win the innermost area, you gain the card that is outside that district. And the cards break the rules in one way or another, and they are generally quite good. But on the other hand, the other areas give you gems, so those are very important as well. You do not have to go for the cards to be able to win the game, definitely not, but using some of the cards can definitely help you win the game. So now we have all placed our brokers for the first round here. So we turn up and have our tiebreak value. So in this case I have the highest tiebreak value, so I will win eventual tiebreaks here. Then you score 1 area at a time in 1 quadrant, and then you score the entire quadrant distributed in gems. So in this first quadrant here, I will gain the merchant area. I'm the only one with a broker there, so I will gain the 3 points from that one. Henrik, the green player, gained the black gem from the harbor, and I managed to win the card here. As I were the one with the most value in the entire quadrant, I have first choice of gems here. Then you then go over the other quadrants in order, 1 through 4, and you do the same. You distribute the gems, you distribute the points, and you see who will gain the card, etc. Now, some of the quadrants here can have events. That is something that was introduced in the Is Plus expansion, as well as a 5th color, so we can play with 5 players. And those change the rules slightly for all the players. So in this case, the first quadrant had an event that said that each gem you gain from that quadrant also gives you a victory point straight up. We go through the motions here, first round. You may wonder why we have the 5 colored blocks. Those are actually the gems that were included in the first edition of the game. But we use these for an upcoming event that can come, we don't know yet, but I can tell you that it will come up, which is called Speculation, that is placed beside the board, and each player can bet on a certain gem to be the highest in value at the end of the game. If they are correct, they gain 3 points. If they are incorrect, they will lose 2 points. And the black gem here is used as a pass action that you do not want to speculate at all. Now, as you see in the market, each player will gain on each row. The one with the highest value will gain the gem. White gems are always a gem of your choice out of the 4 primary colors. And then you check which of the columns that has the highest values in brokers. And the one with the highest value will move up 2, the second will move up 1, and the third will move down 1, and the fourth will move down 2. And this will happen at the end of each round. And this is how you determine the value of the gems. At the absolute end of the round, you choose one of your brokers that you have left behind the screen. You cannot choose one of the brokers that was used for a tiebreak value, and you send that broker to the king to try to impress him, and you gain a value 2 broker back. Now you can play this differently. You can either send your 2 every round, for instance, to gain a pretty good even number there, or you can simply send your lowest value brokers to the king and give up on the points that he gives out, so you gain better brokers to be able to place them on the board instead. At the end here, we set up for the new round, and we draw cards to determine which gems will come to the ports, as well as discovering which events will be in each area and which cards that you can win in the noble quarter of each area. And then you do the round again, where you place your brokers, you determine the winners of each area and the gems, and the game is played over 4 rounds. This can be a quick game if people don't have too much angst, but you can certainly have difficult moments. Do I want to go in and compete against that player in this area? What kind of broker does he have there, etc, etc. So it's you can take a lot of time thinking, but that is something that is dependent of the game group, of course. Now, this game was quite a long one in East standards. I think we played something of 1 hour and 45 minutes. And that is a very long game of Is. I have cut out about an hour and 10 minutes of that material, so I've cut out quite a lot here. Now, something to think about when you place your brokers. It is good to be the third one into an area. Even if you don't gain that much, you will still gain a gem if you are the third person there. So it is almost always worthwhile if you can gain one area in that quadrant and then gain 1 gem or more from the harbor. But you do not want to be the 4th player into an area unless you think that you can place more and higher values than the other players here. So it's always a gamble. Going last, of course, gives you the opportunity of seeing where the other players place their brokers and see where the contention is, and just choose other areas of the board. Now, each player starts with 2 level 0 brokers, 2 level 4 brokers, 1 level 2 broker, and 3 each of level 1 and 3 brokers. So if you choose to expose your level 4s or your level 0s, the other players know that your hidden brokers are either more or less valuable. That is something you can strategize. For instance, in this case, I have placed both my 0 brokers in District 1. This is because of the event that is in quadrant 1 that says that each broker in the quadrant is worth 1 point or in value, disregarding the actual value on the broker. That event card is called Democracy. And because I have a very good tiebreaker value here, I managed to win that quadrant, or at least the harbor black marked stone from red player here. The red player still gained 2 of the gems from the harbor, but I was the second player there. But by placing 2 of my 0 brokers face up, the other players know that I cannot have a level 0 broker face down somewhere. So that is something that gives the other players information. And I tend to try to keep my level 1 and 3 brokers face up, level 2 broker sometimes, and sometimes level 0 broker. But unless I really want to intimidate one of the other players or the other players out from a certain area, I don't like to place my level 4 brokers face up. It's better to keep the other players guessing. On the other hand, placing your level 0 brokers into the market will still mean that you gain a point from the market. You always gain 1 point when placing in the market, disregarding the value of the broker. So you can always place in there to gain some value out of it, and unless other players place in the same row, you can actually gain a gem from it. And that is something that's also important to know, that if you have a broker in an area, disregarding the value of that broker will win the area if no other player has entered that area. So a level 0 broker can still be used to gain certain action cards, for instance. We actually played this wrong. I read that wrong card in the book. The quadrant 1 action card I read as not being an action card to win in that quadrant, but actually what that card does is the Queen's card, and that gives you the opportunity to lock a certain area before you place brokers one of the rounds. So that is quite a powerful card, and that was my mistake. believe we also play this round wrong here. The quadrant 1 action card is actually gives you 2 points to the king's value instead of 2 points outright. I think we missed that as well. That is one thing that is something, well, not a negative point, but it can be a bit annoying. Unless you play this game often, you have to check up the different cards and events because they are not that obvious, most of them, what they do. So you have to have the rulebook at hand most of the time when you play this game. But on the other hand, the cards and events give this game quite a lot of replayability. But other than the cards and the way they come out, or in the order they come out, there are actually no luck in this game. It is all mind games with other players. And the playing field are equal for all the players. I mean, the cards that come out, you know what they do. You cannot be sure that one certain card will enter game this session, but if it doesn't, it's not something that will make or break your strategy. The cards break the rules, but they aren't that powerful and necessary for certain strategies to work. The different actions are also quite balanced in my opinion, because the different games, they give a lot of points at the end of the game. If you have the most of the game type that is highest on the market at the end of the game, you gain 24 points, and that is quite a lot of points. But then again, if you take the static points from the merchants, those are 3 points each. So if you have taken 5 actions to gain market instead of, say, taking a lot of yellow in this case, that would still be 15 points, and as long as you have 1 yellow at the end of the game, assuming that that was the game that was the highest value, you would still get some points in a 4-player game. Now in a 5-player game, that is different, because the 5th player doesn't get any points at the end of the game. The black market gems, the black gems, they can be worth up to 24 points as well. If you collect 7 or more black stones, you gain 24 points at the end of the game. So those can also be quite a big swing in a case of you having a lot of black and another player who does not have a lot of black. Now, if you have played this game before, you notice that we actually missed the event card on quadrant 2. That says that you cannot do anything in this quadrant with the cards, and I think that you can actually use the card to move broker out of that area. So that was my mistake. Something that is also interesting in this game is that earlier there were an action card that was called the Pope, and the Pope gives the owner a tiebreaker at the end of the game if you have the same amount of gems as another player when you do the scoring. And all of us disregarded that card, and that was probably a mistake, because we realized at the scoring that the Pope can give you quite a lot of points at the end. So that is one tip I can give you: do not disregard the Pope. Actually, most of the cards are quite good to get, but on the other hand, you don't want to give up too many gems just to gain a lot of cards. You can only play 2 cards in a round, so if you just collect cards after card after card, you can end up in a situation where you can't play them all, and that is definitely wasted actions. Now, one thing that is quite important in this game is balance, I feel at least, because if you manage to have a balanced strategy, get maybe win one of the game types, even the worst game type is still gives you quite a lot of points. It gives you 12 points if you have the most games of the worst game type, while the best gives you 24. But if you are not last in every game type, you have a few blacks, preferably 7, and you gain a few points throughout the course of the game, you usually have a quite good chance of winning the game. It all depends on how the other players are doing. Now, the majority part of this game is not only in the areas throughout the game, it is also in the end game scoring. So you do not want to be the only one with red games. You can have 10 red or 20 red. If the other players do not have more than 9 games, it doesn't matter. So you want to weigh your actions. Yes, I can take a couple of more yellow games here to make sure that I will win yellow, but if I think that I will win yellow anyway, it might be worth to gain blue or green games just to make sure that I have a higher chance of getting a better placing at the end in that game type. So you have a lot of choices in the game. Now, the event in the third quadrant here in the last turn says that the entire quadrant is quarantined, so the only thing that will be given out is the games in the harbor. You cannot gain a card, you cannot gain the 3 points, and you cannot gain a black stone in that quadrant. So that makes the quadrant less interesting for the players. At the end of the game, in the 4th round here, the winner of the card gains a stone of their choice. A white stone is always a wild stone out of the 4 basic colors. I said that before. So that is one way to gain a few extra gems. But in each round there are only 19 gems that will be distributed. They're out of the regular types, and then there will be 4 blacks. So a total of 23 gems distributed on 4 players if you get an equal amount of gems. That means that if you have gained more than 5 gems in a round, you have probably done well. And one of the earlier rounds here, I gained 7 or 8 gems in one round. So that was quite a lot, and that was big swing upwards for me. Now, the black gem that I placed on my broker here was because of one of the cards I had that made that broker worth 5 points instead of its actual value. So I used a level 1 broker, but thanks to the card it was turned into a level 5 broker. All the cards are one shot. Once they are used, they are gone. But in this case, I mean, that card can be quite valuable. Now, why would I place a 4 here if I think that I will win it anyway? Well, that is because I have another card here that lets me exchange 2 brokers. So I saw an opportunity to gain more gems in the second quadrant. So that is why I did a change like I did here. Emil played a card that let him decide which of the games will win the valuation in the market this turn. So he can use that card is used to be able to be the one to decide which game will be worth the most. That can be quite powerful in cooperation with the speculation. If you had made a speculation on the green or yellow here, for instance, you know that you will win those 3 points or avoid losing 2. depending on what you did. As you see here, throughout the game I have had quite high tiebreaker values, and that is something that you have to balance as well in this game. Yes, there are a lot of balancing in this game. You need to balance your tiebreaker value with the brokers you put out on the board. High tiebreaker value means that you have lower value brokers out on the board. So that is something that is to your detriment unless you actually can use that tiebreaker value to win your games anyway, or areas anyway. Now we are in the 4th round scoring here, and we are going over each district in turn. And again you see that I have a quite good turn here. I have already collected 3 greens and 2 yellows, 1 blue and 1 black. And I hoped that I would push up the yellow stone, but Emil used it on the green stone instead. So green ended up being worth the most this game, and red ended up being worth the least. So we are doing the last thing in the game here, and that is sending one last broker to the king. Now, the king can give at most 12 points to a player, so that is most often not something that will be the game winner, so to speak. But then again, it's still points, and it's the same value as the worst game type, so that is something that is notable. Now, I have a lot of games. I'm almost ashamed at the amount of games I managed to accrue this game, and it was a lot at the cost of Emil, the red player here. So I managed to tie the yellow, I managed to tie the green, so that gives me quite a lot of points, and the Pope would have, of course, given the play with the Pope quite a few points here. Now, we were quite sure that red would not be the most valuable gem here, so as you see, several of us have not gone into red very much. But that is something you take a gamble with at the early stages of the game. What type of game do I want? Will I go for a balance of all the games, or will I hope that 1 or 2 of the games are worth a lot more? Now, as you see, I make a quite big jump here, and that is because I have collected 7 games. Henrik has collected 6, but Ewan here, that was the second player at that time, only gained 0 points there. He had not collected the black at all. If Ewan, for instance, had collected 5 or 6 games, he would have claimed second place and would have been quite a lot further along this track. Now, I win with 101 points here against Henrik's 80, which is quite a big gap for this game. That is mostly due to the other players not bashing on me. For some reason they decided to bash each other more than they bashed me. And it is something that I can give you to take with you until next time you play this game. Don't let one player be undisturbed. Even if that player has the best position in, say, turn order or tiebreaker, if you let one player get away with gaining too many games in the areas, it will be difficult to stop them. This game is really fun, especially if you have a group of players that like games that involve bluffing and backstabbing. And most of the game actually is dependent on the players trying to screw over their opponent, so to speak. I really like this game. I think it's an undervalued game, so to speak. And I really hope that you try this out at least a couple of times, because it has more depth than it seems, especially if you have read the intro text. That doesn't imply any depth at all, but I'll leave that discovery for you to make later. I really recommend you play this with the expansion if possible. I think the new version actually has the expansion in the box already, because it makes the game better, in my opinion. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you will watch the next one. This game was recorded before GotCon, so the next couple of games will come from GotCon, most likely. But until next time, I bid you farewell, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.